My sister Sarah sent me a screenshot by accident meant for her drug dealer, and I realized the golden child who could do no wrong had been living a double life for years. Sarah 23F and I 25F have always been complete opposites. I was the family disappointment, while she was the shining star. Perfect grades, straight A. Student headed to medical school with a full scholarship. Mom and dad constantly held her up as the example I should follow. Why can't you be more like Sarah, they'd say during every family dinner. Last Tuesday started like any other day. I was at work doing data entry when my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. I thought it was probably another update about her upcoming medical school interview, or maybe asking to borrow money again. Sarah had this habit of texting me when she needed something, but rarely just to chat. I opened the message expecting the usual sister small talk. Instead, I saw a screenshot of bank transactions. My heart stopped when I read the details. 5 transfers to someone named Rico for $800 each over the past month. The last message in the screenshot read, "Ready for the usual pickup tonight behind Target at 11 p.m. Bring exact change this time." I stared at my phone for maybe 10 minutes trying to process what I was seeing. The perfect daughter who gave anti-drug speeches at school assemblies was apparently buying something from Rico behind Target. I screenshotted everything before responding. "Wrong person," I typed back, trying to sound casual. Sarah immediately called me panicking. "Delete that right now," she demanded. "It's not what it looks like." I asked what it was supposed to look like then. A bank account with her name sending money to someone named Rico with messages about midnight pickups. She hung up on me. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. Sarah never hung up on anyone. She was too polite, too perfect, too concerned about what people thought. I spent the rest of my workday thinking about all the times Sarah had acted strange recently. The late-night phone calls she claimed were study groups. The new designer clothes she said were thrift store finds. The way she always had cash but complained about being broke to our parents. The mysterious boyfriend she never brought home or even named. Most telling was how she'd lost 20 pounds in 2 months and claimed it was from stress eating. When I got home that evening, Sarah was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with mom and dad. They all looked up when I walked in like they'd been discussing something important. Sarah's eyes were red and puffy, like she'd been crying. Mom immediately started talking about how stressed Sarah was about medical school applications. "Your sister is under so much pressure," Dad added. "We need to be supportive right now." Sarah gave me this look that was part pleading, part threatening. I realized they had no idea about Rico or the bank transfers or whatever was happening behind Target at 11 p.m. Sarah had somehow convinced them she was just stressed about school. I went to my room and started thinking about everything I knew about drug dealers from crime shows. Rico was probably not selling study guides for $800. The weight loss, the cash, the secrecy, the panic when I saw those messages. My perfect sister was either buying or selling drugs, and our parents had no clue. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I followed Sarah. She left the house around 10:30, telling Mom she was going to study at the library. Instead, she drove straight to Target and parked behind the building in the employee lot. I parked across the street and watched through my rearview mirror. A beat-up Honda Civic pulled up next to Sarah's car. A guy got out wearing a hoodie and jeans. Even from across the street, I could tell he was older, maybe 30s. Sarah rolled down her window and they talked for maybe 2 minutes. Then she handed him something that looked like an envelope. He handed her something back that she quickly shoved in her purse. The whole exchange took less than 5 minutes. The guy drove away first, then Sarah sat in her car for another 10 minutes before leaving. I followed her home, staying far enough back that she wouldn't notice. She came in through the front door acting completely normal. Asked Mom if there was any leftover dinner and talked about her study session at the library. I couldn't sleep that night. My brain kept running through possibilities. Was Sarah buying drugs, selling them? Was Rico a dealer or a customer? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, what was I supposed to do with this information? The next morning, I decided to do some detective work. I knew Sarah's laptop password because she'd used the same one since high school. While she was in class, I went through her browser history and found something that made my stomach drop. Searches for how to dilute urine tests and can Adderall show up in hair follicle tests and medical school drug screening requirement. Then I found her second Instagram account, the one our parents didn't know about. Instead of study photos and motivational quotes, this account was full of party pictures. Sarah drinking, smoking, and posing with people I'd never seen before. The captions were completely different too. "Living my best life, and tonight's going to be wild and sorry, Mom would disapprove, but she's not invited." But the most shocking discovery was a direct message thread with someone whose profile picture was a sports car. The messages went back 6 months and told the whole story. Sarah had started selling Adderall to other pre-med students. What began as occasionally sharing her prescription had turned into a full business operation. She was buying bulk Adderall from Rico, then selling individual pills to stressed students for $20 each. The $800 transfers were her buying enough pills to supply dozens of customers. She was making thousands of dollars every month while telling our parents she was broke and asking them for gas money. The messages showed she had regular customers at 3 different colleges, students who depended on her pills to stay awake for all-night study sessions. She kept detailed records of who bought what and when. She even offered delivery services and bulk discounts. My perfect sister was running a drug empire while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. I printed everything: the bank statements, the Instagram photos, the drug dealer messages, the customer lists. Then I sat in my room staring at the evidence and trying to figure out what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront Sarah directly, but I knew she'd just deny everything or find a way to explain it away. Another part of me wanted to tell our parents immediately, but I knew they'd never believe me. Sarah could do no wrong in their eyes. If I came to them with accusations about their perfect daughter dealing drugs, they'd probably think I was jealous or or lying. Sarah had always been better at managing our parents than I was. The third option was to wait and gather more evidence, follow her to more drug deals, document more transactions, maybe even record a conversation. But that felt wrong, like I was becoming some kind of spy in my own family. Plus, it was dangerous. If Sarah was involved with serious drug dealers, I didn't want to get caught in the middle of something violent. I decided to give Sarah one chance to come clean. I texted her that we needed to talk privately when she got home from class. She responded immediately asking what it was about. I just said family stuff and left it at that. Let her imagination run wild for a few hours. When Sarah got home that afternoon, she found me waiting in her bedroom. I had laid out printed copies of everything on her desk: the bank statements, the Instagram photos, the dealer messages, the customer communications. She walked in, saw the papers, and went completely white. "Where did you get these?" she whispered. Her hands were shaking as she picked up the bank statements. "This is private financial information. You can't just steal my personal documents." "I didn't steal anything," I replied calmly. "You sent me that first screenshot yourself, remember? Everything else I found on your laptop and social media accounts that you left logged in. Nothing here is illegal for me to access." Sarah tried the innocent act first. These messages could mean anything, she said. Rico could be anyone. Maybe I was buying textbooks from him or getting tutoring help. The Instagram photos are just me having fun on weekends. There's nothing wrong with college students partying occasionally. I pulled out the most damning piece of evidence: her detailed customer spreadsheet that listed names, schools, and purchase histories. "Explain this then," I said, sliding the paper across her desk. 23 regular customers buying Adderall twice a week at $20 per pill. Total monthly revenue over $6,000. Sarah stared at the spreadsheet, and I watched her perfect facade finally crack. She started crying real tears this time, not the manipulative ones she used on our parents. She begged me not to tell Mom and Dad, said it would ruin her medical school applications and destroy her entire future. I let her cry for a few minutes, then asked the questions I'd been rehearsing. How long had this been going on? How did she meet Rico? Was she using drugs herself or just selling them? Did our parents really have no idea about any of this? The whole story came tumbling out between sobs. It started freshman year when Sarah got an Adderall prescription for ADHD she didn't actually have. She'd researched the symptoms online and convinced a campus doctor she needed medication to focus. Initially, she used the pills herself during finals week, but then other students started asking where they could get Adderall. Sarah realized she could make serious money selling her extras. $20 per pill was standard rate on campus, and she had access to 30 pills every month. That was $600 of pure profit for doing nothing. The demand was so high that Sarah quickly ran out of her own supply. That's when she found Rico through a friend of a friend. Rico sold pharmaceutical drugs to college dealers across the state. Sarah became one of his best customers, buying hundreds of pills every month and distributing them across 3 campuses. By her junior year, Sarah was clearing over $5,000 monthly. She used the money to pay for everything our parents thought they were covering: rent, groceries, gas, clothes, entertainment. The financial aid checks our parents thought were going to school expenses were actually going straight into Sarah's savings account, but she was also using Adderall regularly now. Not just during finals, but daily to maintain her perfect GPA and energy levels. She was taking 2 or 3 pills every morning, plus extras during big study sessions. The weight loss our parents attributed to stress was actually from stimulant abuse. As Sarah finished her confession, I felt a weird mix of emotions: anger that she'd been lying to everyone for years, disappointment that my perfect sister was actually a drug dealer, but also a strange sort of understanding. Sarah had been under enormous pressure to be perfect, and she'd found a way to maintain that image while making serious money. I told Sarah I needed time to process everything and decide what to do. She begged me again not to tell our parents and offered to cut me in on her profits if I stayed quiet. I said I'd think about it and left her crying in her bedroom, surrounded by evidence of her double life. That night at dinner, Sarah was back to her normal, perfect self. She talked about her upcoming medical school interviews and asked Dad for advice about her personal statement. She thanked Mom for doing her laundry and offered to help with dishes. It was like watching an actress perform a role she'd perfected over years of practice. Our parents hung on every word. They asked about her classes, her professors, her study groups. Sarah answered everything smoothly, never missing a beat. When Mom mentioned how proud they were of her, Sarah smiled and said she just wanted to make them happy. The irony was almost too much to bear. After dinner, I went to my room and made a list of my options. I could tell our parents the truth and watch their golden child fall from grace. I could blackmail Sarah into changing her behavior or cutting me in on her profits. I could report her to the police or her school administrators. Or I could stay quiet and let her continue living her double life. Each option had consequences I wasn't sure I was ready for. Telling our parents would destroy Sarah's medical school dreams and probably tear our family apart. Blackmailing her would make me complicit in her drug dealing. Reporting her to authorities might result in serious criminal charges. But staying quiet meant enabling behavior that was dangerous for Sarah and her customers. I decided I needed more information before making my decision. Over the next week, I started paying closer attention to Sarah's behavior and routine. I noticed things I'd missed before. The way she always had energy even after studying all night. How she never seemed to eat full meals anymore. The slight tremor in her hands during family dinners. I also started researching Adderall abuse and the consequences of dealing prescription drugs. What I learned scared me. Long-term stimulant abuse could cause serious health problems, including heart issues and mental health disorders. And dealing controlled substances was a felony that could result in years in prison. More concerning was what happened if Sarah got caught by someone other than me. If Rico was dealing with serious quantities, he was probably connected to larger criminal networks. If Sarah owed money or crossed the wrong person, she could be in real physical danger. College drug dealing wasn't as harmless as Sarah seemed to think. I also researched what happened to medical school applicants with drug charges. Even minor possession charges could permanently disqualify someone from medical licensing. If Sarah got caught dealing, she wouldn't just lose her current opportunities. She'd be banned from ever practicing medicine. By the end of the week, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to turn Sarah into our parents or the authorities immediately, but I also wasn't going to enable her dangerous behavior. Instead, I was going to give her an ultimatum and see if she was smart enough to take it. I confronted Sarah again the following Friday. This time I had a different approach. Instead of threatening her, I laid out exactly what would happen if she continued dealing drugs. The health risks, the legal consequences, the career implications. I showed her articles about other pre-med students who'd ruined their futures with similar decisions. Then I made my offer. Sarah had 2 weeks to completely exit the drug dealing business. She needed to stop selling to customers, tell Rico she was done, and get help for her own Adderall addiction. If she did all that, I would keep her secret and help her transition back to a normal college experience. But if she didn't take the deal, or if I found evidence she was still dealing after 2 weeks, I would tell our parents everything. Not because I wanted to destroy her, but because someone needed to intervene before she destroyed herself. Sarah tried to negotiate. She said 2 weeks wasn't enough time to properly exit the business. She had customers depending on her and commitments to Rico. She promised she'd quit after the semester ended or after medical school applications were submitted. Always another excuse, another delay. I held firm on my timeline. 2 weeks was plenty of time to send some text messages and have one conversation with Rico. If Sarah was really serious about changing her behavior, she could make it happen quickly. The longer she stayed involved, the more likely something would go wrong. What I didn't tell Sarah was that I'd already started collecting additional evidence just in case. I'd taken photos of her meeting Rico behind Target. I'd screenshotted more of her customer communications. I'd even found receipts hidden in her room that showed exactly how much money she was making. If she called my bluff, I was prepared to prove everything, but I was really hoping it wouldn't come to that. Despite everything, Sarah was still my sister, and I didn't want to see her life ruined. I wanted to give her the chance to fix things herself before anyone else had to get involved. Whether she was smart enough to take that chance remained to be seen. The 2 weeks that followed were the longest of my life. I watched Sarah like a hawk, looking for any sign she was still dealing. Every text message, every phone call, every time she left the house, I wondered if she was meeting customers or picking up from Rico. The stress was eating me alive, but I had to know if she'd actually follow through. At first, Sarah seemed to be making an effort. She stopped staying out late and started coming home right after classes. She wasn't getting the constant stream of text messages that used to buzz her phone all night. When I checked her location, she was actually at the library when she said she was studying. Maybe my ultimatum had worked. But then I noticed other changes that worried me. Sarah was more irritable than usual, snapping at mom and dad over little things. She complained about headaches and had trouble sleeping. During family dinners, she picked at her food and seemed distracted. I realized she was probably going through withdrawal from her daily Adderall use. The real test came on a Thursday night, 8 days into my 2-week deadline. Sarah said she was going to study group, but something about her behavior seemed off. She was nervous, fidgety, checking her phone constantly. When she left, I decided to follow her one more time to see if she was really done dealing. Sarah drove to a different location this time. Instead of Target, she went to a 24-hour diner on the other side of town. I parked where I could see the entrance and waited. About 10 minutes later, a girl who looked like a college student went inside, then another one, then a guy in a Letterman jacket, all within 15 minutes of each other. My heart sank. Sarah wasn't meeting Rico, but she was definitely meeting customers. She just moved her operation to a new location and was probably selling her remaining inventory. Either she thought I wouldn't follow her to a different spot, or she was planning to claim this was actually a study group if I confronted her. I waited another hour and watched 5 different people go in and out of that diner. Each one stayed for just a few minutes, barely long enough to order coffee. This wasn't a social gathering, it was clearly business transactions. Sarah was still dealing, and she'd lied to my face about stopping. When Sarah got home that night, she acted completely normal, told our parents about her productive study session, and asked mom about weekend plans. She looked me right in the eye when she said goodnight, and I realized my perfect sister was an even better liar than I'd thought. She had no intention of stopping her drug business. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I couldn't give Sarah any more chances, and I couldn't keep enabling her dangerous behavior. If she wasn't going to stop on her own, then someone else needed to intervene. I started planning exactly how I was going to tell our parents the truth. I decided to wait until the weekend when we'd all be home together. Friday after dinner, I asked mom and dad if we could have a family meeting on Saturday. Said there was something important about Sarah that they needed to know. They looked confused, but agreed. Sarah shot me a panicked look but didn't say anything in front of our parents. Saturday morning, Sarah cornered me in the kitchen before mom and dad woke up. She was angrier than I'd ever seen her, practically shaking with rage. "You promised you'd give me 2 weeks, she hissed. It's only been 9 days. I told her I'd followed her to the diner and knew she was still dealing. The 2 weeks were contingent on her actually stopping, not just moving locations. She tried to convince me that the diner meeting was really a study group, said she could prove it by showing me the notes they'd taken. I laughed and asked if she really thought I was that stupid. 5 different people each staying for 5 minutes wasn't a study group, it was drug transactions. She realized her lie wasn't working and switched tactics. Sarah started crying and begging again, said she needed more time to properly wind down her business. Her customers were depending on her, and she couldn't just abandon them cold turkey. She promised this was the last week, and after that she'd be completely completely done. Just give me until next Friday, she pleaded. I told her it was too late. She'd had her chance and chosen to keep dealing instead of stopping. Now our parents were going to learn the truth, and she'd have to face the consequences of her choices. Sarah called me jealous and vindictive, said I was just trying to destroy her because I'd never been the favorite child. That actually hurt because part of me wondered if she was right. Was I telling our parents because I genuinely wanted to help Sarah, or because I was tired of being the family disappointment while she got all the praise? I pushed those doubts aside and reminded myself that Sarah was in real danger. If I didn't intervene now, things would only get worse. The family meeting happened at 2 p.m. in our living room. Mom and Dad sat on the couch looking concerned while Sarah and I took the chairs facing them. I'd prepared what I was going to say, but my hands were still shaking as I pulled out the folder of evidence I'd compiled. This was it. No going back after this moment. I started by telling them I'd discovered something about Sarah that they needed to know. Said it was serious and they might not want to believe it at first, but I had proof of everything. Mom immediately asked if Sarah was okay, if she was hurt or in trouble. The concern in her voice made what I was about to do even harder. Then I laid it all out. The accidental screenshot that started everything. The bank transfers to Rico, following Sarah to drug deals behind Target and at the diner, finding her secret Instagram account and customer spreadsheets, her Adderall prescription that was supposed to treat ADHD she didn't have, the thousands of dollars she was making every month selling pills to other students. As I talked, Mom and Dad's expressions changed from confusion to disbelief to horror. They kept looking at Sarah, waiting for her to deny everything or explain it away, but Sarah just sat there staring at her hands, saying nothing. Her silence was more convincing than any confession could have been. When I finished, Mom asked Sarah if any of it was true. "Is this really happening?" she whispered. "Are you actually selling drugs?" Sarah finally looked up with tears streaming down her face and nodded. She couldn't even speak, just nodded while our parents' world collapsed around them. Dad was the first to explode. He started yelling about how disappointed he was, how Sarah had betrayed their trust, how this could ruin her entire future. He couldn't understand how his perfect daughter had been living such a lie. Mom just cried silently, shaking her head like she couldn't process what she was hearing. Sarah tried to explain herself through the tears, said it started small, just helping other students during finals, that it wasn't really hurting anyone because they were going to get Adderall somewhere anyway. She claimed she was planning to stop after medical school applications were done. Every excuse sounded weaker when she said it out loud. I showed them the evidence piece by piece. The bank statements proving thousands in unexplained income. The Instagram photos showing a completely different lifestyle. The customer lists with dozens of names and purchase histories. The messages coordinating drug deals and discussing prices. There was no way to deny or minimize what Sarah had been doing. The worst part was watching our parents realize how long they'd been fooled. All those times Sarah asked for money while secretly making thousands. All the praise for her perfect grades that were maintained with illegal stimulants. All the pride in their responsible daughter who was actually running a criminal enterprise. They felt stupid and betrayed and heartbroken all at once. Dad immediately started talking about consequences. Sarah was going to stop dealing drugs immediately. She was going to get counseling for her addiction. She was going to pay back every penny she'd made from illegal activities. And she was going to face whatever legal consequences came from her choices. No more protecting her from reality. But Mom was more focused on the medical school implications. If Sarah got arrested or charged with drug dealing, her acceptance would be revoked immediately. Even if charges were dropped, the conviction would follow her forever. She might never be able to practice medicine or get licensed in any healthcare field. 15 years of perfect grades and preparation could be wiped out by this mistake. Sarah begged them not to contact police or school administrators, said she'd learned her lesson and would never deal drugs again, promised she'd get clean and focus entirely on legitimate studying, asked for one more chance to prove she could change without outside intervention. She was terrified of losing everything she'd worked for. I watched my parents struggle with an impossible decision: turn in their own daughter and destroy her future, or cover up serious criminal activity and enable dangerous behavior. They'd never faced anything like this before. Their perfect family image was shattered and they didn't know how to move forward. After 2 hours of crying and arguing, we took a break. Mom and Dad went to their bedroom to discuss what to do privately. Sarah and I sat in uncomfortable silence, both emotionally drained from the confrontation. Finally, she asked why I'd really done this. Was it to help her or to hurt her? I told her honestly that I wasn't completely sure. Part of it was genuine concern for her safety and future, but part of it was probably resentment about being the overlooked daughter while she got all the attention and praise. I'd wanted our parents to see that their perfect child wasn't actually perfect. Maybe that made me a terrible sister. Sarah said she understood and didn't blame me for telling them. She admitted she'd been scared for months that someone would find out. The stress of maintaining her double life was overwhelming and she'd started making careless mistakes. In some ways, she was relieved that the truth was finally out, even though the consequences would be devastating. When our parents came back downstairs, they'd made their decision. Sarah would stop dealing drugs immediately and get treatment for her addiction. They would monitor her bank accounts and communications to ensure compliance, but they weren't going to report her to authorities or inform her school. They'd give her one chance to clean up her life before taking more drastic action. Sarah was relieved, but I was frustrated. Our parents were still protecting her from real consequences. They were more concerned about preserving her medical school chances than addressing the seriousness of what she'd done. Nothing was really going to change, except now they knew about it. But Dad surprised me by adding more conditions. Sarah would move back home immediately so they could supervise her activities. She'd undergo undergo regular drug testing to ensure she stayed clean. All her electronics would be monitored, and she'd have no privacy until she proved she could be trusted. Her car would have a GPS tracker, and she'd have a strict curfew, essentially house arrest until further notice. Sarah protested that these restrictions would interfere with her classes and medical school preparation. Dad said that should have been considered before she decided to become a drug dealer. If she wanted to rebuild trust, she'd have to accept whatever supervision they deemed necessary. No negotiation. Over the next few weeks, Sarah's life changed dramatically. She moved back into her childhood bedroom and handed over all her devices for monitoring. Mom drove her to and from classes since her car privileges were revoked. Dad checked her bank accounts daily and required receipts for every purchase. She had to be home by 8 p.m. every night with no exceptions. The hardest part for Sarah was probably the drug testing. She had to provide supervised urine samples twice a week to prove she wasn't using Adderall or any other substances. After years of daily stimulant use, she struggled with fatigue, concentration, and mood swings. Her grades started slipping for the first time in her academic career, but slowly Sarah began to adjust to her new reality. She started sleeping better and eating regular meals. Her weight stabilized and the tremor in her hands disappeared. She seemed calmer, less manic than she'd been during her dealing days. Our parents cautiously began to trust her again as she consistently passed drug tests and followed all their rules. 6 months later, Sarah was accepted to medical school at her top choice university. Our parents were proud, but the celebration was more subdued than it would have been before. Everyone knew how close she'd come to losing everything. The acceptance letter felt like redemption, but also a reminder of what could have been lost. Sarah and I have a different relationship now. She's grateful I intervened before something worse happened, but there's still some resentment about how I handled it. I sometimes wonder if I should have tried harder to help her stop on her own before involving our parents, but I also know she wasn't going to change without serious consequences. The most surprising outcome was how our family dynamic shifted. I'm no longer the automatic disappointment, and Sarah is no longer the automatic golden child. Our parents learned that perfection can be performance and started paying attention to both of us more equally. Sarah's fall from grace was devastating, but it also created space for me to be seen and valued. Rico was arrested 6 months after Sarah stopped dealing. Apparently, he'd been under investigation for much longer than any of his college dealers realized. If Sarah had still been involved when the police moved in, she would have been charged as part of a larger drug trafficking operation. My interference probably saved her from federal charges. Sarah starts medical school next month. She's nervous about the drug testing and background checks required for clinical rotations, but confident she can pass them. The addiction counseling helped her develop better coping strategies for stress, and she hasn't used any stimulants since our family meeting. She's learned to succeed without chemical assistance. As for me, I'm finally getting the recognition I always wanted from our parents. They realized they'd been so focused on Sarah's achievements that they'd overlooked my own accomplishments. I got promoted at work and started taking evening classes to finish my degree. Being the overlooked daughter taught me independence, but being seen feels pretty good too. The whole experience taught our family that secrets and lies eventually surface. Sarah's double life seemed sustainable until it wasn't. Our parents' favoritism seemed harmless until it drove destructive competition between their daughters. Everyone learned difficult lessons about honesty, trust, and the difference between perfection and performance. Sometimes I still wonder what would have happened if I deleted that accidental screenshot and pretended I never saw it. Would Sarah have eventually been caught by police or overdosed on stimulants or gotten involved with more dangerous dealers? Would our family have continued living with lies until something more catastrophic forced the truth out? I think I made the right choice, even though it was painful for everyone involved. Sarah needed intervention before her behavior escalated further. Our parents needed to understand that their perfect daughter was struggling and needed help, not just praise. And I needed to stop being the silent observer of my family's dysfunction. Sarah's medical school orientation is next week. She's scared but excited to start this new chapter of her life. Our parents are proud but also more realistic about the challenges ahead. The family that almost fell apart over drugs and lies has found a way to rebuild on honesty and accountability. It's not perfect, but it's real.